Hi again. We are going to be joined by Naomi. Do you want to come up on stage? Woo!
Oh, can you hear me? Is that working? Okay, great. I'm slightly terrified now about this slide sharing, so I'm going to try to do that before you leave. My application window, here we go.
You can do it, Naomi. Thanks, Caitlin.
I can do it. I can do
Got
it.
a supportive audience of well-wishers.
Is it working? Oh.
Not yet. Let me turn off my camera, although that shouldn't matter.
Let me see. Oh, no.
No, just hit click.
Application window, share.
Yeah.
There we go.
Awesome.
Amazing. Okay, I'm if it's okay with everyone, I'm not going to put it into full screen mode because I want to be able to see the chat so I can speak to you all. So we'll just leave that as it is for now. But if the slides aren't clear and you need it in larger mode, then obviously let me know. So hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. So my name is Naomi Alexander Naidoo, and I'm community manager at a charity called the Finance Innovation Lab. Unfortunately, I can't see you all, but I would love to know who's in the room. So please do let me know by sharing in the chat your name, maybe where you're joining us from, what you do. And as this session is all about communities, I would particularly love to hear from you. What communities are you part of? And also what communities you might have an active role in. So a community that you might manage, or that you might have some sort of other role in. And yeah, this is very much intended to be an interactive session, at least as is possible in this new online context. So please do keep using the chat and the Q&A as we go along. So to get started, I'm Naomi. I'll say mine rather than type mine because I can't do that much at once. But I'm Naomi from the Finance Innovation Lab, as I said. I'm dialing in today from London. I manage the community at the lab, which I'll speak a little bit more about shortly. And I'm also on the organising committee of a community called POC Impact, which is a community recognising, supporting and connecting people of colour working on social impact in the UK. And I'm part of absolutely loads of communities in the sort of tech for good space, including Zebras Unite, that some of you might know, and of course Ada's List. So while you check in, I'm going to give you a bit of background about the lab. So the lab is all about answering this question: how can we build a financial system that serves people and planet? So a systems change charity, more on that later too, working to transform finance for the better. And we do this through a number of different programs. Lab Fellowship, which is our incubator for purpose-led innovations, intrapreneurship, where we find and support finance professionals who are driving positive systemic change within mainstream finance, Transforming Data, which is a new advocacy program putting social purpose at the heart of data-driven finance, and finally my area of work, Lab Community, which is connecting and convening across all these programs and more. And yeah, great to see in the chat that there's quite a lot of community builders among us as well. So the lab community is made up of over 600 financial systems change makers working on positive change all across the financial system. So that includes those involved in our other programs, so innovators, influencers, civil society organisations, policymakers, regulators and so forth, but also others, influencers, thought leaders, academics, students, you name it. Basically, what I always say is if you believe in a financial system that serves people and planet, and in some way, shape or form, you are working towards getting there, then the lab community is for you. It involves events on topics related to financial systems change, matchmaking to connect people in the community, and also thematic community groups where people work on particular topics. So, for example, at the moment, we're convening a working group of civil society organisations to develop a third sector-led vision of open finance, which those of you who work in fintech and the finance space will know is a major upcoming development in data-driven finance. But the community is really foundational to our other programs. All of our work relies on it and really, really relies on the community for its success, and also our theory of change. So we know we're not going to change the financial system alone. There's only 6 of us. And so everything we do together with the community. And here's some lovely photos of lab community events. But today I'm not going to talk too much more about the lab because we're really here to learn about systems change and in particular the role of community building and making it happen. So what I'd like to explore with you all is how we can harness the power of communities to achieve systemic change. And basically what I'm going to share is a sort of top level overview of some research I did over the summer about the role of community building in systems change. I will say this is very much a work in progress, and it's something that I'm looking to build on and work into a more public report in the coming months. So it's very much the start of the conversation, but I'm hoping that some of you are interested in it and might be interested in taking the conversation further with me. So to begin with, what is systems change? Some of you might be very familiar with this term, some of you might not be. So the first thing to say is that it can be understood as both an outcome and a process. So in terms of an outcome, systems change is exactly what you think it would be. So it's when a system changes. So for the lab, we want the financial system to change so that it serves people and planet. The desired outcome for Ada's List, for example, might be a diverse and inclusive tech industry. But systems change also refers to a process by which that change is achieved. And in this regard, to be honest, it can kind of be seen as a bit of sort of social change, social innovation jargon, but it essentially refers to a growing body of theories, practice, models about how systems change as a model can actually happen. But to understand systems change as a process, we first have to understand what a system is. So I'd love to hear from you. How would you define a system? And you can just pop it in the chat. And also, what are any systems that you might have interacted with already today? So to give you an example, a couple of systems that I've interacted with today are the water system when I brush my teeth. I haven't actually showered today, don't judge me, but then I would have interacted with the water system a bit more. My computer system, and also Remo, which is the system that we're all using to join this conference. But yeah, I'd love to hear from other people what systems they've interacted with today. But essentially, a system is just an interconnected set of elements organized to achieve something. And systems can be relatively straightforward. So, for example, the system of my coffee machine that I use to make coffee every morning, or they can be complex. And where they are almost always complex is when we're thinking about human systems. And human systems are a network of relationships designed to address a particular problem or a particular goal. And finance, although it might not often seem like it, is a human system, as is the tech sector. But there's 3 defining features of a system. Is that it has a purpose, that it involves different elements, and it involves interactions between those elements to achieve that purpose. Systems change then involves grappling with the complexity of the whole system, which, as I said, when we're talking about human systems, can be incredibly complex. So it's complex, it's messy, it often involves trying many different things at many different parts of the system. It's continuous and long-term. Obviously, systems don't change overnight. It's non-linear, so something might change at one part of the system. There might be positive progress in one regard, but there might be a regression in another. Equally, some positive change could happen, and then that could regress. It's also emergent and it's unpredictable. So the strategies and approaches that might work, we might not know when we set out to change the system. And just as the system itself is interactive, systems change has to be too. And there are loads and loads and loads of different models in the field of systems change of how this can be achieved. And I've put a couple on the slide there so that hopefully you can see. I won't go into detail about any of these today, but if people are interested in learning more, then feel free to get in touch with me afterwards, and I can give you some more information. And I will also share in the chat, and I'll actually do that now before I forget, a link to a report that the lab did some years ago about our kind of strategy for systems change and different models that we use. But as a community manager, what I'm particularly interested in is that when you look at the literature out there about systems thinking and systems change, there are notions of community building that repeatedly come up. And this is illustrated really well in Systems Change and How to Do It, which is kind of a seminal report on systems change produced by New Philanthropy Capital, which I've got on the slide there. And in this report, they identify 6 principles for systems change, 2 of which can also be seen to be core to community building. So namely engaging multiple actors, so basically engaging lots of people and lots of different sorts of people, and 2, doing it together, so basically collaboration. When I was doing research on this topic over the summer, these notions came up time and time again. And indeed, systems change and systems thinking are often defined partly through reference to relationships, connections, collaboration. Now, as systems change approaches look at and seek to work with the full complexity of systems, including all actors in the system and the different relationships between them, it makes sense that these ideas of interconnectedness, collaboration, working with diverse stakeholders and so forth would be central. But more specifically, what is the role of communities in systems change? To understand this further, we can look at the work of a pioneer in systems change thinker called Margaret Wheatley, who's the founder of something called the Buchanan Institute that any of you are familiar with the systems change world will probably know well. So drawing on their work over the last decade or longer, she developed a theory for systems change in which communities are key. And that theory has 3 stages. So it starts with networks, which are basically groups of people with similar interests. People usually engage with networks out of self-interest. That might sound bad. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It could be a very noble self-interest. It could be furthering the impact of a social impact project, charity, whatever. But these groups are also often quite fluid, so people come and go. Out of these networks, though, form communities of practice. And these are smaller groups where people work together for mutual benefit, sharing knowledge, supporting each other, and creating new knowledge for their field or for their practice. And it's worth saying here that what Wheatley refers to as network, I think many of us would refer to as community. So for the lab, what she refers to as network would be our sort of whole community. And then the communities of practice would be the smaller community groups that I mentioned earlier. The next stage, which is where it gets interesting, where the magic happens, is what she calls systems of influence. So from the communities of practice, systems of influence, or in other words, systems change, can emerge. In line with what we previously said about systems change, this is unpredictable, but it's essentially when change happens that can influence the mainstream, so policy, funding, the narrative, and so on. And to understand why communities can play such a key role here, and how also we can build or engage with communities to make systemic change more likely, it's quite useful to look at community building itself. So again, I've put a couple of different sort of theories, frameworks, models of community building on screen. These are just a couple of the ones that I looked at when I was doing my research. On the left is Communities of Practice by Love and Wenger, who are actually the people that coined that term. In the middle is the Network Building Canvas by Social Change Agency. That's open sourced online, anyone can access it. And on the right is the Mountain of Engagement used by Mozilla Foundation, who I'm sure many of you are aware of. And again, I won't go in depth into these tools, but what I found when I was looking at these frameworks is that there's a few elements that consistently come up in all sort of different community building theory that you look at. The first is that communities, just like systems, are arranged around a common purpose. Secondly, they involve value creation and value exchange. So there must be benefits to members from joining the community, but also ways for them to contribute or generate their own value. And finally, there is a sense of progression of engagement. So it might be quite low commitment to join a community, but there are ways to become more involved and active in the community. And in turn, this makes the communities more self-organizing, more resilient, and better resourced. So identifying these common areas of community building, it becomes quite clear why community building could be an effective strategy for systems change. Community building is essentially a way to bring together diverse stakeholder groups with different perspectives around a common purpose and facilitate collaboration between them, which, as we've learned, is vital for systems change. In particular, the progression of engagement that is part of community building offers people a way to engage in the sort of long-term and trusting relationships that are required for systems change. Moreover, and of crucial importance, the value exchange inherent in community building means that it's a resource-efficient way to do this. So while effective community building undoubtedly does require substantial time and resource, and those of you who are joining us who manage your own communities, I'm sure will agree with that. The resource committed to that community is returned and multiplied as members begin to contribute and to progress their engagement. This is really important because most systems change organizations are small and resource poor in comparison to the system they are trying to shift. So community building offers them basically a route to multiply their capacity for change, try and test more interventions at different parts of the system, and gather more learning along the way and share it with each other, share it with others in the community. So basically, systems change requires effective relationship building and collaboration between diverse actors, and community building offers an effective and resource-efficient way to do this. To illustrate this, I'm just going to use a couple of examples from the lab's work. So the first is Lab Fellowship. This is our early stage incubator for purpose-led financial innovations. So we take a community-based approach to running the fellowship to try to increase the prospect of systemic change from the fellowship. So for example, it's co-created with the community ahead of the last fellowship. So before we'd even launched it, we ran a series of ideation sessions with different community members up and down the UK to understand the key themes, questions, and challenges that we should raise in the fellowship. We also relied on the community for outreach for the fellowship to help us find the most promising innovators out there. And we collaborated with the community to deliver business strategy sessions to the fellows, so bringing community members in to design and deliver content. The community is involved in every stage. So we first elicit their support at a launch event. We match fellows with coaches and community members throughout the program. We ask select community members to attend a pitch practice towards the end of the program to help the fellows perfect their pitches in a friendly environment. And at demo day, we don't only invite potential investors, but also others from the community who might be able to help in other ways, so other sort of non-financial support. And that event is actually designed so that community members are forced or nudged to pledge certain forms of support to the fellows that they can then follow up on afterwards. After the program, fellows remain at the centre of our community and continue to engage in our wider community program. And what's really important to stress here is we do this, we do things in that way, not just to benefit the fellows, although, you know, obviously we do hope that they benefit, but it's also the intention is that it helps community members with the financial systems change work that they're trying to do at different parts of the system. And those are different parts of the system that, you know, the fellows might not have access to, the lab might not even be able to reach. So a key role, for example, that we see the fellows in providing is inspiration to different change makers around the financial system about what the better financial system could look like, and then they can go and share it, you know, with their colleagues and their peers in that part of the financial system. Another example from our work comes from our work to make our community and also kind of financial innovation in general more inclusive. So we've launched specific initiatives for women in financial innovation and also people of colour working in financial innovation. And in both cases, the community has been really vital to making these a success, and again, to increasing the likelihood of contributing towards systemic change. So we launched our Women's Network back in 2018, and from our existing community that we already had, we were able to bring together amazing women working on financial innovation. And because of that community feel that we already had, quite quickly create a really intimate and trusting and, obviously sometimes quite difficult discussion about the challenges that people were facing and what they thought needed to change. That's now grown into a network of over 200 women. We've done several follow-up events, and we've partnered all along the way with community members to showcase different gender and finance related initiatives from women in our community. Working with the community was also really, really vital to delivering our People of Colour initiative. So the idea actually first came from a conversation with someone that attended one of our women's events. So the strategy was sort of put in place by the community. And she's now gone on to become a key member of our community and is involved in a lot of the rest of our work. But really, as a small team who only has one person of colour in the team, which is me, it would have been quite difficult to do that work in an authentic and effective way if we weren't a community building organisation. But because we were, I could partner with amazing people of colour in our community to deliver the event. So as a co-host, as volunteers, speakers, facilitators, and so on. The community has also helped to amplify our insights from these sessions and spread them across the financial system, again, beyond the reach of our own networks. So way, way more than we could ourselves. And finally, and crucially, the wider community means there are ways to continue to engage with and support people involved in these initiatives outside of those particular events. And there's many people who first met us through these initiatives that are now on our board, are teaching on our programs, and so on. So zooming out away from the lab to the wider tech ecosystem, the great news is there are loads and loads and loads of communities working towards systemic change in tech. Here's just a few that I'm part of or that I've engaged with, but there's many, many more. Obviously, big shout out to Ada's List. But really, whatever systemic change you're working towards, there is a community out there that can support you. And obviously, if there isn't, you can always start one. So that is most of what I wanted to say. But what I really hope you got from this talk is that if you are engaging with purpose-led communities in tech, and I'm pretty sure you are because you're at the Ada's List conference, then you're a systems change maker. And I really want to encourage you to think about how you could engage more with communities or build communities for whatever systems change it is that you're trying to achieve. So that's it from me, but I'd love to see any questions you have, and also to hear from you what your experiences of creating change for communities, or any other examples you have of communities working for systemic change. And I think we should have a couple of minutes left maybe to do that, but I'll let Rosie tell me if it's not.
We've got 2 minutes. Jump in there, everyone.
How does it work? And I can stop sharing. See if there's any questions. I think these are questions from the last one. Well, if we don't have any questions for now, I'll just go to the next slide. So yeah, before we close, just a couple of next steps. So I'm going to be developing this initial research into a more in-depth report on community building for systems change. So if you're interested in being kept in the loop with that, then please feel to drop me a line and I'll put my email on the next slide. If there's any community builders in the audience, you're also invited to join a community of communities, which is a group of community builders and community managers working in the social impact and social startup and tech space that I've been convening over lockdown. So get in touch with me if you'd like to join, but also if you'd like to review or input into that report and potentially provide case studies from your own work. And of course, I wouldn't be a very good community manager if I didn't invite you to join my own community. So if you're working in fintech or working to change finance in any way, then of course you're very, very welcome to sign up to the lab community too. And the link is there. And here are my contact details should you want to get in touch with me. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much. That was really, really fantastic. Really enjoyed that. And I, of course, love hearing about more communities. So what we're going to do now, we have one more panel today. It will be happening in 5 minutes. So it's 6:15. everybody stay in this room for the Restructure series. I'm super excited about this panel. It was originally going to happen in September, but we've rescheduled it so that you all can hear these awesome speakers talking about working from home in the pandemic. And it's not just what you're going to be thinking about. It's also covering the range of the impact that this has had on all of us. So I'm going to stop talking. But at 6:15. We will be reconvening 6:15, everybody. So go grab some water and do whatever you need to do. And then we'll grab some wine or tea and we'll see you in a few minutes. Awesome. Thank you.